Martin and Liza Stockdale, devoted parents with a seemingly perfect life, never imagined that their eldest son Aaron and youngest Jonah would be drawn into a nightmare that would destroy their family forever. The Stockdale family lived in a large wooden house at the far end of Pine Ridge, a place surrounded by thick trees and long, quiet roads. People passing by often slowed their cars to admire the neat garden and the old-style porch decorated with flower pots. To outsiders, the home looked peaceful, almost like it belonged in a picture book. Martin and Liza Stockdale had built a reputation in the community as disciplined, private, and deeply committed to their routines. They rarely missed their weekly chores, never hosted visitors, and always kept their curtains half closed, even during the day. Many neighbors found this unusual, but no one imagined anything sinister behind their quiet behavior. Martin worked as a technician at a local manufacturing plant. He left early every morning, driving the same blue truck he had owned for years. Liza stayed home, managing everything within the house with precision. Their 3 children, Aaron, Beth, and Jonah, were raised with strict rules. They followed a tight schedule of study, chores, and limited outdoor activities. The siblings were rarely seen playing with other children, and whenever they appeared in public, they walked close together and never strayed far from their parents. Despite this, they looked healthy and well cared for, giving the impression of a family that preferred to stay in its own bubble rather than engage with the outside world. Behind the closed doors of the Stockdale home, the atmosphere remained calm but always tense. The children were taught to obey without question, and they moved through the day as if following invisible lines drawn on the floors. Even their conversations were controlled, kept short and practical. Neighbors sometimes heard faint sounds from the house, footsteps, the vacuum running, or the creaking of floorboards, late at night, but never anything alarming. The Stockdales made sure their lives appeared ordinary to anyone watching from the outside. Occasionally, residents of Pine Ridge would spot Beth sweeping the porch or Jonah carrying groceries into the house. Both children avoided eye contact, offering only brief nods before disappearing inside. Aaron, the eldest, seemed more withdrawn than his siblings. He walked with his shoulders slightly hunched, as if carrying a weight no one else could see. Some people believed he was simply shy, while others whispered that the Stockdale parents kept their children under unusually tight control. Despite small curiosities, the family never caused trouble or drew serious attention. Their bills were paid on time, their yard was always clean, and the parents remained polite whenever they had to interact with others. Pine Ridge residents had become used to the Stockdales' quiet lifestyle and rarely questioned it. No one suspected that beneath this calm surface, something had been growing in the shadows for years, something that would one day erupt and shake the entire community. The house on Pine Ridge stood like a silent witness to the lives inside it. While the neighborhood slept peacefully each night, the Stockdale family lived according to strict rules that hid emotional cracks no one outside could see. These cracks would eventually widen, but at this stage everything appeared perfectly controlled. The Stockdale home looked like a symbol of discipline and order, but behind every closed curtain and every carefully timed routine, darkness was quietly taking shape, preparing to reveal itself in the most devastating way imaginable. The night that changed everything began quietly, with only the wind rustling through the pine trees surrounding the Stockdale house. It was a cold winter evening, the kind that made the streets glisten with frost and the air feel sharp against the skin. The neighborhood was unusually still, and the few streetlights flickered faintly, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted roads. Inside the house, the Stockdales followed their usual evening routine. Martin checked the locks on the doors while Liza prepared the family's dinner. The children were in their rooms, finishing homework and silently moving about as they always did. No one anticipated that this night would shatter the family's world and leave the community in disbelief. The first sign of trouble came from a distant driver passing along Pine Ridge Road. They noticed a faint orange glow rising from the roofline of the Stockdale home. At first it seemed like a reflection of the streetlights or the flicker of a fireplace, but as the driver approached, the glow grew brighter and more alarming, and small clouds of smoke began to curl from the eaves. Panic rose in the driver's chest as they realized the house was on fire. Emergency services were immediately called, and soon the sound of sirens cut through the quiet night. Residents who were awake peeked through curtains, unsure whether it was an accident or something more sinister. Firefighters arrived swiftly, their engines roaring and lights flashing across the frost-covered lawn. They pulled hoses and began dousing the flames that consumed the lower floors and licked the edges of the roof. Smoke filled the air, thick and acrid, stinging the eyes and making it difficult to see. As the fire crews worked tirelessly, they realized that something horrifying had happened inside. The house was not just burning, it had been the scene of a violent tragedy. Among the charred debris, they discovered the lifeless bodies of Martin and Beth Stockdale. The parents' faces bore the unmistakable signs of a struggle, while Beth's injuries suggested she had tried to fight back before the flames engulfed her room. The sight left even the most experienced firefighters shaken, their professional detachment shaken by the brutality they encountered. In the chaos of the fire, Aaron and Jonah were nowhere to be found. Their absence immediately raised questions and heightened the sense of unease. Investigators combed through the scene, noting that the fire had started in at least 2 separate locations. Clearly intentional. Items had been disturbed throughout the house, and the family's safe appeared to have been tampered with some of its contents missing. Among the wreckage, a photograph of the Stockdale family lay broken on the floor, with Beth's face scratched out. Each detail painted a picture of personal anger, not random violence. The combination of fire, murder, and disappearance made it clear that this was not a simple case of arson. It was something far more calculated, something that would soon grip the entire town in shock and horror. As investigators began to examine the remains of the Stockdale house, the full extent of the horror slowly emerged. The fire had left much of the home in ruins, but enough clues survived to suggest that this was no ordinary accident. Burn marks on the floors and walls indicated that the flames had been deliberately set in multiple locations. One area near the kitchen showed evidence of accelerants, a chemical smell lingering faintly even through the smoke. Firefighters had initially thought the blaze had spread naturally, but the patterns told a different story. Someone had planned the fire to destroy evidence and conceal the violent acts that had already taken place inside. Among the charred debris, the bodies of Martin and Beth stood out as chilling markers of the crime. Martin had injuries inconsistent with the fire, suggesting he had been struck before the flames reached him. Beth's body revealed signs of a struggle, deep bruises and scratches across her arms and face, as though she had fought fatally to defend herself. The contrast between the fire damage and the violent injuries indicated that death had occurred before the blaze, and a fire had been set afterward, likely to cover up the truth. The investigators knew immediately that this was a crime of rage and intent, not a careless accident or household mishap. The family safe, located in Martin's study, had been forced open. Papers, valuables, and even a small stash of cash were missing. Investigators took note of what remained, including a few important documents that hinted at hidden tensions within the household. Scattered around the study were broken picture frames and shattered glass, including one frame containing a family portrait. Beth's face had been deliberately scratched out, a detail that struck the team as deeply personal. Whoever had carried out this crime had more than just financial motives. They had a reason rooted in anger or obsession, someone with a connection to the family or an intense grudge. In other rooms, investigators found signs of hurried movement. Furniture was overturned, and objects had been thrown across the floors. The children's bedrooms offered particularly eerie details. Aaron's bed was neatly made, while Jonah's room looked almost untouched, except for a few torn papers under the mattress. These small signs suggested a timeline. The children had likely been in their rooms when the attack began, and someone had been moving through the house with purpose. The meticulous care with which some areas were left undisturbed contrasted sharply with the destruction in others, hinting at a calculated plan to target specific members of the family. Throughout the ruined home, the sense of intimacy in the violence was palpable. It was not a crime committed by a stranger who happened upon the house. It was deliberate, personal, and filled with an intensity that left even seasoned investigators unsettled. Each clue, from the accelerant-soaked floors to the scratched-out photograph, spoke of planning, motive, and deep-seated resentment. The Stockdale house, once a symbol of order and discipline, now stood as a scene of chaos and brutality, silently holding the secrets of the night that would haunt Pine Ridge for years to come. As forensic teams collected evidence, the weight of the crime settled on the investigators. Every detail they uncovered hinted at a story of anger, betrayal, and meticulous planning, a story that would slowly unfold in the days to come. The ashes of the Stockdale home contained not only the remains of the victims, but the first pieces of a puzzle that would shock the world, revealing the dark undercurrents hidden behind the walls of a family that seemed, from the outside, perfectly ordinary. As investigators dug deeper into the Stockdale family's life, Aaron Stockdale, the eldest child, quickly became a focus of attention. While neighbors had always viewed him as quiet, obedient, and slightly withdrawn, records showed a very different side of his life. Bank statements revealed that Aaron had opened multiple accounts under a false name, moving money in and out in amounts that raised serious red flags. Large withdrawals had occurred in the weeks leading up to the tragedy, but there was no record of where the money had gone. This discovery stunned investigators. A boy who had seemed so controlled and reserved now appeared to be involved in secret financial dealings, hinting at motives and planning that no one outside the home could have imagined. School records added to the picture of a hidden life. Aaron had been missing from classes repeatedly, often without explanation. Teachers remembered seeing him appear nervous and distracted when he did attend, but no one had suspected that he might be hiding such dangerous secrets. Security footage from the local library and nearby streets showed him meeting unknown adults late in the evenings. Each meeting lasted only a few minutes, but they were frequent enough to suggest that Aaron was being introduced to people and activities far beyond his age. The pattern was alarming. His life, which had seemed predictable and tightly managed, was in fact intersecting with people and circumstances that were dark and possibly criminal. Even more unsettling were the items found in his room during the investigation. Hidden under his mattress were notebooks filled with scribbled notes about money, secrets, and individuals he feared. While some pages looked like ordinary teenage musings, others hinted at a preoccupation with control and rebellion. Investigators noted that he seemed aware of impending danger, as if he had been preparing for an event he feared but could not fully understand. This newfound perspective painted Aaron not just as a passive observer of the crime, but as someone who may have been actively involved in the circumstances leading up to it. Neighbors' testimonies added another layer of complexity. People who had once described Aaron as shy and obedient now recalled moments of sudden agitation, unexplained absences, and even minor incidents where he had broken rules within the house. These small details, which had seemed inconsequential at the time, suddenly took on new meaning. Investigators began to see Aaron as a young person caught between the strict confines of his family and the lure of external influences, a boy whose secret life had quietly been growing more dangerous by the day. The combination of secret bank accounts, suspicious meetings, and hidden notes suggested a calculated pattern of rebellion and risk. Aaron was not simply a bystander in the events that unfolded. He had been operating in the shadows, making choices that would ultimately intersect tragically with the violence that engulfed his family. The discovery of his secret life forced the investigation into a new direction, one that focused not only on external suspects, but on the family dynamics and the complex, hidden behaviors of the children themselves. The quiet boy that Pine Ridge residents had assumed they knew was in reality living a double life, one that would soon make him a central figure in the shocking story of the Stockdale family. While Aaron's secret activities drew intense attention, Jonah's disappearance became an even more perplexing mystery. Unlike his older brother, Jonah had no record of secret bank accounts or suspicious meetings. His absence from the house the night of the fire puzzled investigators. His bedroom, however, told a story of its own. While most of his belongings were neatly arranged, Under his mattress lay a hidden notebook filled with chaotic sketches, notes, and cryptic messages. The pages were covered in frantic handwriting, detailing dark visions of violence, warnings, and cryptic observations about people in the house. Investigators believed that Jonah had been aware of danger long before the fire, yet his notes were vague, never revealing exactly who or what he feared. Each page of Jonah's notebook seemed to capture a mind struggling to process fear and confusion. There were drawings of shadowy figures and abstract diagrams that hinted at someone watching or following him. In addition to the visual sketches, he had written fragmented sentences about broken trust, hidden plans, and running before it's too late. The investigators speculated that Jonah may have been trying to leave behind a record of his thoughts, a warning for someone who might come after him. His handwriting became increasingly erratic toward the end of the notebook, suggesting that he was becoming more anxious and desperate as events in the house escalated. Phone records added another layer of mystery. Jonah's phone had been left behind in the bedroom, with no signs of recent activity. There were no outgoing calls, no messages to friends, and no attempt to contact his parents. This suggested that his disappearance was deliberate, that he had fled under pressure rather than being taken. Investigators began to piece together a timeline. He may have sensed the danger before Aaron or the other family members did, and chose to disappear rather than confront it. This theory raised more questions than it answered. If he had escaped, where was he going, and what was he trying to avoid? Neighbors and friends described Jonah as quiet but intelligent, often observing situations silently rather than engaging directly. While Aaron had dared outwardly with subtle secrecy, Jonah's behavior suggested internalized fear. He rarely spoke about his day or shared personal experiences with friends or neighbors. This quiet nature may have masked an acute awareness of the growing tension in the house. Investigators wondered whether he had been silently planning an escape for weeks, leaving behind the notebooks and drawings as evidence of his observations and fear. The more investigators studied Jonah's materials, the clearer it became that he had lived in a state of constant vigilance. He had been tracking people, events, and unusual occurrences within the home, documenting them obsessively. The fragmented notes hinted at family secrets and potential threats, but without explicit names or dates. Jonah's disappearance, combined with the mysterious content of his notebook, created a sense of unease for investigators. It was as if the boy had been trying to leave breadcrumbs to explain his actions, yet had deliberately left gaps, leaving them to piece together a story that only he truly understood. Jonah's absence not only deepened the mystery of the Stockdale murders, but also shifted the focus of the investigation. While Aaron's suspicious activities suggested rebellion and hidden alliances, Jonah's disappearance and his cryptic notes indicated fear, foresight, and knowledge of a threat that investigators had yet to fully identify. The notebooks became one of the most important pieces of evidence in understanding the sequence of events, and the question of Jonah's location remained a haunting concern that would soon lead the investigation into the surrounding forest, revealing secrets no one in Pine Ridge could have anticipated. 2 weeks after the fire, the investigation into the Stockdale family had reached a tense and uncertain point. Aaron remained missing, and the cryptic clues left behind by Jonah offered more questions than answers. Then an unexpected lead emerged from the dense forest surrounding Pine Ridge. Local hikers reported spotting a young man in a small abandoned hunting cabin, approximately 30 miles from the Stockdale home. The cabin, hidden deep among pine trees and overgrown bushes, had long been a place avoided by locals, rumored to be a hangout for vagrants or those seeking isolation. When authorities arrived to investigate, they found Jonah inside, gaunt, pale, and clearly frightened. He had been living off minimal supplies, collecting rainwater and scavenging what little food he could find. Jonah's discovery was both a relief and a puzzle. His presence at the cabin confirmed he had fled the Stockdale home intentionally, but the reasons for his flight were still unclear. Inside the cabin, investigators found scattered belongings, torn clothing, makeshift bedding, and remnants of food that had been carefully rationed. Most striking, however, were the items that connected him directly to the Stockdale family. There were old photographs of the family, documents from the house, and even a set of written instructions for opening the family safe. These instructions were precise, as if someone had trained or guided Jonah in their use. At first, investigators feared that he might have been complicit in the robbery or in other crimes that had unfolded, yet his demeanor suggested desperation and fear rather than calculation or defiance. Jonah's notebooks were also present in the cabin, their pages now even more erratic. They contained frantic annotations about a man named Clyde, though the handwriting was scattered and unclear. He wrote about a figure who watches and plans, and detailed encounters that seemed threatening. Investigators began to piece together a new timeline. Jonah had fled the house before the fire, likely sensing danger escalating beyond his control. The cabin had served as a temporary refuge, giving him time to survive while the authorities scrambled to locate him. The condition in which Jonah was found suggested he had been in hiding for some time. He was physically weakened, with minor scratches and bruises likely from moving through the forest and the cabin's rough interior. His mental state appeared fragile. He was anxious and hesitant, glancing constantly toward the windows and doors as if expecting someone to arrive. The investigators realized that Jonah had been living in a constant state of fear, aware that danger could follow him even in this remote location. Inside the cabin, forensic experts found subtle but crucial evidence linking Jonah to the events at the Stockdale home. The documents he had brought contained fingerprints and partial writing samples from someone else, suggesting he had been manipulated or influenced. It became clear that Jonah's flight had not been an isolated act, but part of a larger, more complex scenario involving multiple actors. The cabin, once just an abandoned shelter, now revealed itself as a pivotal piece in understanding the chain of events leading to the murders. Jonah's discovery marked a turning point in the investigation. He was no longer just a missing child, he was a key witness, a living link to the events that had destroyed his family. What he had seen, fled from, and carried with him would soon unravel secrets that no one in Pine Ridge had imagined, revealing the intricate web of manipulation, fear, and violence that had culminated in the Stockdale tragedy. The quiet boy who had vanished into the forest held answers, but only if the investigators could carefully decode the fragments of his harrowing experience. As investigators began to analyze the evidence recovered from Jonah's cabin, a shocking revelation emerged that changed the entire direction of the case. Fingerprints found on the documents and safe instructions did not belong to Jonah, Aaron, or even any member of the Stockdale family. Instead, they matched a man named Clyde Mercer, a former employee of Martin Stockdale, who had been fired several months earlier for embezzlement. Clyde had disappeared after his dismissal, and no one had heard from him until now. Investigators quickly realized that this was not just a story of a family torn apart from within. It was a carefully orchestrated manipulation by an outsider with a personal vendetta. Clyde's history with the Stockdales provided context for the motive. He had worked as a maintenance and logistics assistant at Martin's factory, giving him access to sensitive financial information and knowledge of Martin's routines. After being fired, Clyde had harbored a deep grudge, blaming Martin for his professional and personal downfall. Evidence suggested that he had been quietly plotting revenge, and Jonah's documents indicated that he had used the Stockdale children, particularly Aaron, as pawns in his plan. Clyde's fingerprints on the instructions implied that he had trained Aaron in how to access the family safe and manipulate certain situations, grooming him for a larger scheme that ultimately went violently wrong. The investigation revealed that Clyde had been the hidden force behind the escalating tension in the Stockdale household. He had approached Aaron under the guise of mentorship and guidance, convincing him to rebel against his parents and steal money from the family safe. Clyde manipulated Aaron's sense of resentment and independence, making the boy believe that he could secretly take control of his life while escaping the strict rules imposed by Martin and Liza. However, as the plan progressed, events spiraled out of control. Clyde had intended to rob the house, but the confrontation turned deadly, resulting in the murders of Martin and Beth. Aaron, realizing the situation had escalated beyond his control, fled with Clyde's assistance, but soon became trapped in a terrifying reality he had never anticipated. When authorities finally located Clyde, he attempted to flee, sparking a tense pursuit through the outskirts of Pine Ridge. Law enforcement officers cornered him near a secluded property, and during the arrest, Clyde's confessions began to unravel the intricate web of deception. He admitted to manipulating Aaron, detailing how he had gained the boy's trust and trained him to perform specific tasks in preparation for the robbery. Clyde explained that the violence was unplanned, an outcome of panic and rage when Martin confronted them. The murders had not been premeditated to the level of his initial plan, but the intent to commit theft and coerce Aaron into rebellion had set the chain of events in motion. Further investigation revealed that Clyde had monitored Jonah as well, knowing the younger boy had keen observational skills and could recognize patterns in the household. Clyde had intentionally left evidence to implicate Aaron while keeping Jonah under surveillance, ensuring that the situation remained under his control. This revelation shocked investigators. What had appeared to be a simple family tragedy was, in fact, the product of meticulous manipulation, psychological coercion, and an outsider's long-held vendetta. The Stockdale murders were no longer just a story of rebellion or misfortune. They were a calculated crime orchestrated by a dangerous, cunning individual who had used the innocence of children as tools in his violent plan. The truth about Clyde Mercer changed the case entirely, showing that the Stockdale family had been caught in a trap set by a man who exploited trust, fear, and family dynamics to achieve his sinister goals. The revelation cast a dark shadow over every clue, every disappearance, and every act of survival, confirming that the murders were the result of far more than youthful rebellion. They were a testament to the destructive power of manipulation and revenge. Months passed after Clyde Mercer's arrest, and the Stockdale case continued to haunt the community. Investigators remained unsettled by the unresolved question of Aaron's fate. Despite discovering Jonah in the cabin and unraveling Clyde's manipulation, Aaron's disappearance remained a mystery. The boy had been a central figure in the events that led to the tragedy, and his absence was a constant, nagging problem in piecing together the full story. Authorities feared the worst, but hope lingered that he might be found alive. Then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Hikers exploring a remote part of the forest stumbled upon a shallow grave hidden beneath a thick layer of leaves and brush. The discovery shocked law enforcement and investigators who rushed to the scene. Upon excavation, they found Aaron's body. He had been dead for several days, and the circumstances of his death suggested a violent struggle before he was buried. Next to him was a torn backpack containing money, documents, and a crumpled note written in a shaky, almost illegible hand. The note revealed that Aaron had attempted to escape from Clyde Mercer, but Clyde had tracked him down. It described Aaron's terror, his desperate efforts to flee, and his realization that he could not outrun the man who had manipulated him from the very beginning. The contents of the backpack were equally revealing. The documents connected directly to the Stockdale family's financial records and a safe instructions, confirming Aaron's involvement, but also highlighting the extent of Clyde's control over him. The money inside suggested that Aaron had tried to secure what he could before fleeing, attempting to reclaim some sense of independence from the chaos that Clyde had imposed. Investigators pieced together a timeline. Aaron had fled the house in the immediate aftermath of the murders, trying to escape the consequences of both his actions and the manipulations of Clyde. He had hidden in the forest, but eventually, exhaustion, fear, and the relentless pursuit by Clyde led to his tragic death. With Aaron's body discovered, the final pieces of the Stockdale puzzle began to align. The family's deaths, the fire, Jonah's flight, Aaron's secretive actions, and Clyde Mercer's manipulations, all fit into a cohesive narrative. Clyde had orchestrated the robbery, used Aaron as an instrument of his plan, and indirectly caused the deaths of the parents and Beth. Aaron in turn had been caught between a manipulative adult and the deadly consequences of events spiraling out of control. Jonah had survived, but only by fleeing into the forest and carrying with him the evidence that ultimately revealed the truth. The revelations of Aaron's death and Clyde's role sent shockwaves through Pine Ridge and beyond. The story of a disciplined, seemingly perfect family destroyed by an outsider's manipulation captured headlines and dominated conversations. People were horrified not only by the brutality of the murders, but by the realization that a single individual's obsession could unravel an entire family. The case became a chilling reminder of how quickly trust can be exploited and how innocence can be manipulated for violent ends. Clyde Mercer was ultimately convicted of multiple charges, including the murders of Martin and Beth Stockdale, arson, manipulation of a minor, and the killing of Aaron. The trial drew intense media attention, and the details of his manipulations left the public in disbelief. The Stockdale family's tragedy became a story that would haunt Pine Ridge for generations. A story of innocence, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of a single person's rage and cunning. In the end, the quiet family that had seemed so ordinary became a symbol of a crime that was anything but ordinary, a reminder that danger can lurk where it is least expected, and that even the most controlled lives can be shattered in an instant.